Well, welcome back to our reconvened IEP meeting. I think before we get started, just to make sure everyone knows each other, we should all introduce ourselves. I'm Bruce Goldstein. I'm the Director of Special Education for the school district.
I'm Sue Griebler. I'm the first grade teacher at Jones Elementary School.
I'm Joe Frisetta. I'm Reed's dad and also the designated note taker too.
I'm Gail Frisetta, Reed's mom.
I'm Virginia Stern. I'm the speech language pathologist at the Kennedy School.
And here I've brought a picture of Reed. I don't think any of you have met him yet.
He's
cute.
yeah,
Very
he's
nice.
adorable. Very nice.
Thank you.
Well, we're here to pick up on the issues that we hadn't resolved at the last meeting. Talk about program and talk about services. Now, did you get an opportunity to go to the Kennedy School?
Actually, we didn't get a chance to. We had an appointment with Mrs. Stern last week, and Reed got sick, and we were unable to make that appointment. But I did have some questions about the Kennedy School, if you don't mind. I'd like to ask some of these questions. Mrs. Stern, at the Kennedy School, how many children are in each of the classrooms?
Well, altogether we have 55 students with communication disorders, all kinds of communication disorders, and of course they're different ages. So they spend half the day in the regular classroom and half the day in a communication-focused classroom, and there are between 5 and 8 students in those classes.
Okay. And is there individual speech therapy provided for those children?
Yes. All the children, they receive therapy 1 or 2 times a week, twice a week usually.
Just to interject, some of those are group sessions and some are individual sessions.
Okay. And how do you work on socialization skills between the deaf and hard of hearing children and the other children in the classrooms there?
Well, since so many of the deaf and hard of hearing children have implants now, we believe that they are getting the kind of socialization language, both in listening and speaking, that is important, and so they are getting it in a natural way.
I've heard some really good things about your program. Thank you for sharing that with us.
We're very proud of our program at Kennedy. We've tried to do a school where we've really got people who have background and experience in working with deaf and hard of hearing children, so we can really provide a natural environment, but with people who have that experience. Because at the alternative at the Jones School, what's your experience? Have you had deaf
I
children?
have not had a deaf child in the class. I've had a few hard of hearing students, and some of them did quite well.
Okay. So you haven't had any deaf children in your classroom. Are you willing to work with a deaf child in your classroom?
Oh, I would be willing to. I think I would need some cues from you to make that an easier transition for him.
Okay.
We've heard you've done fantastic things with the children you've had.
Well, thank you.
Well, I wanted to provide some information for you also. I have a report here from Reed's Auditory Preschool. I have a copy here for you, for each of you. This report talks about the need for Reed to have speech therapy 3 times a week, at a minimum 3 to 5 times a week for 30-minute sessions. And they really feel that that's an important stepping stone for him to close his language gap. And I also have another letter here from his audiologist that supports the need for intensive speech therapy for you.
Right, we appreciate your providing this to us. We're going to obviously have to digest this. Mrs. Stern, am I correct that typically we've looked at 2 sessions a week for children?
Yes, that's what we provide, and actually at Kennedy School, because we do have the 55 children with special needs, we can arrange the therapy sessions more efficiently.
Well, we're really looking at Reed having 3 therapy sessions with a speech and language pathologist who is experienced with working with deaf and hard of hearing children. And what I hear you saying, is this correct, that you usually at Kennedy provide those services just twice a week?
If indicated,
Okay.
yes.
just twice a week.
Right, well, what we can do, and I don't want to keep on prolonging meetings, but one of the things we could do is take a look at this and you have a chance to review it.
Right.
And then we can at least come back on this and talk about whether we're talking 2 sessions or 3 sessions, and look at that. We might also look at the possibility of going with one or the other and coming back and reconvening in a shorter period of time. Now, we don't want to delay for services, so maybe we could agree that we'll start with the 2 because that's what, but and we'll come back after we've reviewed this and see if we feel it should go up, come back in a month maybe and see how the progress has been.
The 3 could be a possibility then?
Yeah, it could be a possibility. Definitely, we would have to provide an appropriate education for Reed, and if that's what he needs, then that's what we would surely be obligated and willing to do.
Okay, well, that's something we could really consider, twice a week. The other issue that we were looking at for Reed was his socialization skills. I did have the opportunity to look at the procedural safeguards provided by the school district at our first IEP meeting, and as I understand it, the safeguards do talk about education in a regular classroom for disabled children with supplemental aids. This would really provide Reed, if we were able to place him in the Jones School, with the opportunity to build friendships with children in his neighborhood.
One concern I'd have about an individual aid is if we're talking socialization, that aid could kind of come between Reed's interactions with his hearing peers, and with an adult in the middle, that wouldn't be a naturalized situation. It might actually impede some of that interaction.
If you had an aide in the classroom, wouldn't that be a benefit for other children of special needs? Couldn't you incorporate more children into that room?
This is the way the aid is usually used in the classroom. It gives the teacher more time to spend with the special children who need her help, and then there's someone else to direct some of the other activities.
Well, so now that's more in line with, now we're talking a classroom aid as opposed to an individual aid. Something we could consider. What we're also concerned about, though, is Reed has this language delay. Mrs. Stern, about how much of a gap is that?
I believe 12 to 18, 16 to 18 months, yeah.
All right, so in the 12 to, let's say, 18-month range, we're concerned that if Reed goes into a regular classroom, if he were at Jones, we really don't have experience in working with deaf children there. So at Kennedy, the regular education teachers have in fact worked with children who are deaf. And we could make sure that whatever teacher Reed would have at Kennedy for the first half of the day in the regular classroom would be a teacher who has had deaf children before. And then work intensively during the afternoon in the special class to try to deal with this language gap, as opposed to putting him into the classroom and having an aide who we don't want to come in between his interaction, but we want to try to bring his language up to speed. So
I'd be happy to provide some contacts or even work with you myself, Mrs. Griebler, in the classroom to give you some ideas on working with Reed in the classroom and put you in contact with the people who have worked with him at his oral school. I think that it would be a really great time for him to move. He's right now moving from his oral school where he is with other deaf children, and it's a great transition time for him to move right into the neighborhood school, as opposed to maybe going to Kennedy right now and moving back to Jones in a year or so. I think it's an opportune time for Reed to make a move to his neighborhood school with the support of an aide in the classroom that could, as my husband said, be there to also support other children with disabilities.
And I think that's an opportunity, maybe further down the road, for me to be trained and get some help from you and from other people in the field so that I could work with him in the classroom.
Absolutely.
well, I think what I'm hearing here is that, well, we've got several competing interests, which is always the situation. We
Sure.
run into that all the time, and trying to figure out what would be the right type of situation. balancing what are the positives and negatives of placement at the Jones School versus the positives and negatives at the Kennedy School. And I hear you saying, I think, that going to Jones School would be one less transition, and having to bring in some background and information to assist a teacher such as Mrs. Griebler, if that's in fact where we were placed. On the other side, a program already in place at the Kennedy School where there's been this experience in working with deaf children, and having him out of the regular classroom a little bit more, but getting more intensity of service with somebody who's got that background. So we're going to have to discuss this a little bit more to see if it could work. It so happens that at the Jones School, we don't have a speech-language pathologist that has background and experience in working with deaf children. At the Kennedy School, because we've set that up for deaf children, Mrs. Stern is the one who has that background. So that could be a problem.
Yeah, you're right. That is the other issue, is the speech and language for Reed. As an alternative, what if we offered to provide the transportation and take Reed, if we had Reed placed at Jones School, take Reed over to Kennedy for his speech language twice a week, if you're
Great idea.
recommending that.
Well, that is something I guess we could consider. We'd have to look at the scheduling and see how, when the schools, start and stop, and the transportation time, and see if that could be worked out. But let us look into that. I don't want to prolong, obviously, having more meetings, but it's important to us to make sure that Reed does get an appropriate education. So why don't I check into that, and you can check with the principal over at Jones, and maybe you can get some more information from Kennedy, and I'll gather that together, and then we can come back and talk a little bit further about that. Does that sound agreeable to you?
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. We really do appreciate you working with us.